finding that the cloth does indeed date back to the time of Christ, and with artificial intelligence having something to say about the shroud as well.
In an era where artificial intelligence is exposing secrets buried for centuries, nothing prepared the world for what happened when the Shroud of Turin was fed through the digital mind of a machine. This is not just another relic. The shroud is the most studied, argued over, and mysterious piece of cloth on Earth. Priests, scientists, and skeptics have all tried to solve it and failed. But when AI entered the mystery, it didn't just analyze, it saw something that stunned believers and doubters alike. Are we witnessing the first time a computer has caught a glimpse of the miraculous? The cloth that outlasted empires. The Shroud of Turin is not a relic you stumble upon by accident. It is 14 feet of ancient linen, woven with an impossible image that has resisted explanation for more than 6 centuries. Unlike most religious artifacts, the shroud has no golden frame or precious stones. It sits in a temperature-controlled case, carefully guarded in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy. From a distance, it looks almost plain, a faded outline, ghostly, barely there. But stand closer, and the mysteries begin to multiply. The shroud first appeared in the historical record in the mid-1300s, in the tiny French village of Lire. There were no grand announcements, no parade of bishops. Instead, it surfaced quietly. A local knight, Geoffroy de Charny, claimed to have the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Pilgrims flocked to see it, and the church hesitated, refusing to give it a stamp of approval. It was too incredible, too suspicious. Medieval Europe was awash with fake relics, splinters of the true cross, bones of saints, even vials of the Virgin's milk. But nothing quite like this. What set the shroud apart was the image, a front and back imprint of a man who had clearly suffered. The wounds were consistent with crucifixion, pierced wrists, scourge marks, a wound in the side, blood flows across the brow. For centuries, most people could barely make out the details. That all changed in 1898, when Secondo Pia, an Italian lawyer and amateur photographer, took the first photograph of the shroud. When he developed the negative, he saw something no one expected. The negative image revealed a startling clarity, a haunting face, wounds, muscles, and features invisible to the naked eye. The image wasn't painted. There were no pigments, no brush strokes. Scientists who tested the linen found only the faintest traces of iron oxide, likely from the water used to wash the cloth. The mystery deepened. Through wars, fires, and floods, the shroud endured. In 1532, it barely survived a blaze in a French chapel, leaving scorch marks and water stains along its length. It was rescued, patched by nuns, and hidden during times of political upheaval. Every generation seemed to find new reasons to doubt it, and new evidence that made the doubts more complicated. Why did the image seem to be a photographic negative centuries before photography was invented? Why did the wounds align so closely with what is now known about Roman crucifixion? Details unknown in medieval art. Why, after all these years, has no one managed to recreate the image using any known method? As science advanced, the shroud stubbornly kept its secrets. X-rays, spectroscopy, ultraviolet fluorescence, and electron microscopy, none could fully explain how the image was made. At times, even the Vatican distanced itself from claims of authenticity, wary of being swept up in the endless debates. Still, the shroud drew pilgrims and doubters alike. Skeptics saw it as an ingenious forgery, a medieval masterpiece created to inspire awe and profit. Believers saw it as the most direct evidence of the resurrection, God's signature left behind for a skeptical world. But everyone agreed on one thing: no other artifact had captured so many imaginations or provoked so many questions for so long. Today, the shroud is both a sacred relic and a scientific puzzle, suspended between worlds. It has survived the rise and fall of empires, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and the digital revolution. And just when it seemed every angle had been explored, a new kind of investigator stepped forward, not made of flesh and blood, but of code and logic. Science goes to war with faith. The story of the Shroud is not just about a piece of cloth, it is about the collision between what we believe and what we can prove. The modern era brought new weapons to the fight: laboratories, radiocarbon dating, particle accelerators, and an army of experts. And perhaps the most dramatic turning point came in 1988, when a sliver of linen was cut from the edge of the Shroud for carbon-14 dating. The test was simple in principle. Carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope present in all living things, decaying at a predictable rate after death. By measuring the remaining carbon-14 in the linen, scientists could estimate its age. 3 of the world's most respected labs, Oxford, Zurich, and the University of Arizona, ran the tests independently. Their conclusion, published with confidence, dated the cloth to somewhere between 1260 and 1390 AD. The result was explosive. Headlines declared the Shroud a fake, a brilliant medieval forgery. Critics celebrated, believers mourned, and the Church offered measured statements about the Shroud's value as a symbol, regardless of age. But then the cracks began to show. Textile historians pointed out that the test sample came from a corner known to have been repaired after the 1532 fire. This section may have contained new threads woven in by medieval nuns, a practice called invisible reweaving. If so, the sample was not representative of the original cloth. Subsequent chemical analysis suggested differences in fiber composition and dye content between the tested area and the rest of the Shroud. Meanwhile, researchers in Italy and the United States began looking for new answers. They used wide-angle X-ray scattering to study the molecular breakdown of cellulose in the linen. Their findings suggested the cloth was much older, possibly dating back 2,000 years. Isotope analysis of the flax fibers matched the environmental signatures of the ancient Near East, not medieval Europe. Blood chemistry added another layer of mystery. Scientists confirmed that the stains on the cloth were genuine human blood, not paint. The blood type, AB, is rare worldwide, but more common in the Middle East. The wounds and flows followed anatomically correct patterns, aligning with what forensic pathologists now know about crucifixion. Each new discovery only fueled more debate. For every study pointing to the medieval period, another suggested an ancient origin. For every skeptic declaring the Shroud a hoax, there was a physicist or chemist who insisted the image could not have been made by any known technique. The fight was not just academic, it played out in documentaries, books, courtrooms, and cathedrals. Sincere believers and relentless skeptics became locked in a battle neither side could win. Was the Shroud of Turin the world's greatest fake, or the world's most astonishing evidence of a miracle? By the dawn of the 21st century, the stalemate seemed total. The Shroud remained in its glass case, the arguments endlessly circling. Science could not prove the image was a miracle, but it could not explain it away either. But then something happened that neither side expected. New technology emerged, immune to bias, unfazed by dogma, and powered by a kind of intelligence the world had never seen. The Resurrection Code. As the decades rolled on, the debate over the Shroud became more than just a question of age. It was about how the image appeared in the first place. Theories abounded. Some claimed it was a painting, others a scorch from a heated statue, a bas-relief, or even a chemical reaction. But every attempt to reproduce the image failed. Nothing matched the Shroud's peculiar properties: the three-dimensionality, the superficiality of the coloring, the negative image, and the depth of detail. Then a new idea began to take hold in scientific circles, a theory that would push the debate far beyond the usual bounds of art history or chemistry. What if the image was not made by human hands at all, but by a sudden, intense burst of energy? Researchers such as Dr. Paolo Di Lazzaro at Italy's ENEA laboratory tried to simulate the effect using ultraviolet lasers. Their experiments showed that it would take an immense amount of energy, billions of watts, delivered in a fraction of a second, to reproduce even part of the Shroud's image on linen. Nothing in the medieval world could have generated such power, and even today's lasers can only achieve it in tiny spots. This energy burst hypothesis connected directly to ancient theological ideas. Could the Shroud be a kind of photographic record of a miraculous event, capturing the moment a body transformed or vanished? The speculation was electrifying. Some physicists suggested a particle discharge, or even a form of radiation unknown in ordinary decay. Others insisted it was still a forgery, albeit a masterful one, made by techniques now lost to history. Medical studies of the image added more weight to the resurrection hypothesis. The bloodstains matched the wounds described in the Gospels, from the nail marks in the wrists to the puncture wound in the side. The body showed no sign of decomposition, suggesting it had been wrapped only briefly. Anatomists pointed out that the details, the flow of blood, the bruising, the swollen cheek, were so precise that only a first-hand witness could have depicted them. Medieval artists simply did not have the forensic knowledge. Still, no one could agree on the answer. Every breakthrough brought new questions. Every piece of evidence was met with counterclaims. The Shroud of Turin refused to conform to the categories of science or faith. It was at this point that artificial intelligence arrived on the scene, and with it came the most astonishing revelations yet. Revelations that would send shockwaves through the world of science, religion, and digital technology alike. When AI meets the ancient. In the modern era, the Shroud of Turin was no longer just the territory of priests and scientists. It entered a new arena, one ruled by digital minds that could see patterns invisible to the human eye. When high-resolution scans of the Shroud were uploaded and examined by artificial intelligence, nobody was prepared for what happened next. At first, the project was simple. The goal? Feed the Shroud's intricate markings into an AI, prompt it to generate a lifelike image of the man behind the linen, and see what the machine would find. This was not about faith, doctrine, or even belief. It was about pattern recognition, pure and simple data analysis. The AI did not know the history. It had no concept of Jesus, miracles, or resurrection. It took the scanned details and produced its own composite image, based only on what the linen revealed. What emerged was nothing like the hundreds of stylized Jesus paintings from centuries of Western art. The result was stark, raw, and unsettlingly human. The face it produced was Semitic, rugged, marked by trauma and suffering, a face that seemed both ancient and painfully real. Almost immediately, the AI-generated image began to ripple across the internet. Skeptics were quick to argue that AI draws on vast troves of existing images from across history. They pointed out that Midjourney and similar systems are trained on millions of depictions, from orthodox icons to Renaissance masterpieces. Was the result just a digital echo of the world's collective imagination? But there was a problem with this critique. AI was not given religious art as a prompt. It worked from the raw data of the cloth itself. The features it produced, the proportions, the wounds, the depth of the eyes, matched what forensic anthropologists and medical experts had reconstructed from ancient skulls found in the Levant. The blood patterns, the facial swelling, the structure of the nose and cheekbones, all aligned not with medieval fantasy, but with historical reality. For some, the AI's rendering was a breakthrough, a glimpse into the past through digital eyes. For others, it was a beautifully constructed illusion, a parlor trick dressed in scientific clothing. Yet, no one could deny how strangely moving the image was. How did a medieval artist encode such anatomical and anthropological precision into the cloth? How did they anticipate the findings of modern science 600 years before the birth of forensics? As the debate raged online, one thing became clear. The Shroud of Turin was not giving up its secrets. It was raising new questions, even as the tools for answering them became more sophisticated than ever before. And through it all, the cloth itself remained silent, a witness to an event or a masterpiece of deception, depending on your point of view. Beyond the visual. The story could have ended with an image, a digital face, shared and debated around the world. But as more teams began to use artificial intelligence on the Shroud's high-resolution scans, they realized the cloth was hiding more than just a portrait. AI is not limited to visual reconstruction. With advanced pattern recognition, it can detect chemical signatures, map fiber damage, and trace microscopic residues that the human eye cannot see. By feeding spectral data and chemical scans into deep learning algorithms, researchers began to notice anomalies in the Shroud's composition. One AI system, trained to differentiate between ancient and medieval linen, found that the molecular breakdown of cellulose in the Shroud fibers was consistent with burial cloths from the 1st century, not the 14th. Another system mapped out the pollen grains embedded in the fibers, discovering a majority that traced to plants found only in the Jerusalem area 2,000 years ago. Even more remarkable was the blood chemistry. Using digital stain analysis, AI separated the different layers of residue and confirmed not only the presence of human blood, but patterns of trauma and clotting that matched what would be expected from a rapid, violent death by crucifixion. The wounds were not random smears. They aligned with arterial blood flow, post-mortem pooling, and signs of physical stress only recently understood by forensic science. With every new layer revealed, the Shroud's mystery deepened. If it was a forgery, the artist had achieved feats of realism and detail that modern technology was only now able to identify. If it was genuine, then the Shroud was not just a relic, but a silent witness to an event that defied explanation. Yet, as AI uncovered more, it also challenged the boundaries between science and faith. The most astonishing discovery was the so-called light burst hypothesis. AI analysis of the image's depth profile revealed that the coloring of the fibers was confined to the outermost threads, no more than a few microns thick. This suggested not paint, not heat, not contact, but an exposure, as if the cloth had been briefly blasted with high-energy radiation. The concept was so bizarre that physicists had trouble explaining it without invoking unknown phenomena. Was the Shroud a record of a miraculous transformation? Was it a lost technology, a chemical accident, or something even stranger? No matter the answer, the Shroud of Turin had become the first ancient artifact to be interrogated by a digital mind, and the machine was every bit as baffled as the humans who came before it. Faith, skepticism, and the age of artificial miracles. The news traveled fast. AI had decoded the Shroud of Turin, and the image it produced was shocking not for what it claimed, but for what it made possible. In an age when every miracle is met with 1,000 memes and every relic is put under a microscope, the Shroud had found a new way to haunt humanity's imagination. Faith communities seized upon the AI's findings as vindication, a new sign for a digital age. Priests and pastors shared the image from pulpits, marveling at how the old story had gained new life in the age of algorithms. Some called it a 21st century miracle, proof that even in a world ruled by data and science, there is room for mystery. Skeptics, of course, were undeterred. Leading science writers and digital artists pointed out that AI does not know truth. It blends data, follows mathematical rules, and generates plausible images, but it cannot judge the supernatural. The machine's inability to distinguish fact from pattern is both its strength and its weakness. Yet, even among the skeptics, the questions multiplied. If the Shroud was forged, how did its creator anticipate so many features of a body crucified in the 1st century? Features unknown to medieval medicine or art. If it was not forged, what natural process could have left an imprint so precise, so inexplicable, that even AI cannot reproduce it without access to the original data? Museums, churches, and universities across Europe and America began holding Shroud and AI exhibitions, where visitors could compare the ancient linen with digital renderings projected on massive screens. Some wept, some scoffed, some simply stood in silence, feeling the centuries collapsing into a single electric moment. Documentaries followed, and YouTube exploded with theories, reactions, and breakdowns of every pixel. For every voice calling it proof of resurrection, there was another calling it a beautiful illusion. But underneath it all, a new kind of wonder had taken hold. A sense that even in the age of technology, not every question has an answer. As scientists debated and theologians prayed, the Shroud of Turin kept its silence. It had survived wars, fires, forgeries, and faith. Now, it had survived the gaze of artificial intelligence. What happens when the limits of human knowledge are finally reached? Do we accept the mystery, or do we keep searching for one more answer, one more revelation, no matter how many times the Shroud stares back in silence? The story of the Shroud of Turin is far from finished. Every time new technology peers into its mysterious fibers, more questions seem to emerge than answers. Whether you see it as an artifact, a miracle, a scientific puzzle, or a message from another era, the Shroud invites every viewer to reconsider what is possible. Artificial intelligence has only made the enigma more profound, proving that even in an age of algorithms and cold logic, mystery still has the power to move us. Maybe the greatest secret is not just what happened 2,000 years ago, but why we still care so deeply now. Why do people keep searching, questioning, and hoping for an answer that may never come? That is the power of a true mystery. It binds generations and outlasts the noise of history. If you found yourself questioning, wondering, or even inspired by this story, let us know in the comments. Make sure to subscribe for more mind-bending discoveries and mysteries that defy explanation. The next story could change everything you thought you knew.